Taffburgers. What we're going to make today are what I call Taffburgers. Two of the most popular foods in Wales are hamburgers and curry. So Taffburgers are basically just a combination of the two. They consist of a very simple hamburger mix with an addition of curry powder. The ingredients are for a classic hamburger, which is bread and minced meat, and for this quantity an egg. Now there's about 300 grams of minced meat there. I could have used cooked meat, left over from a joint for example, or left over from a Christmas turkey. I've chosen here to use butcher's mince, which I fried only for a minute or two, just as you can see, to get it brown without being dark brown or too heavily cooked. And then here, this in fact is brown bread, as you can see, a wholemeal, and in fact there's a lot of crusts in here as well. And I've put them through the mincer. So part of the kit I've needed was a mincer for the meat and for the bread. I normally, if I'm going to do both, mince both, I put the meat through first and then the bread bread wipes out the mincer and makes it a lot easier to clean afterwards. In addition to that, there's a little bit of oil to bind it, and a whole egg, and that basically is the classic hamburger mix. It's good, there's no salt, there's no fancy additives or anything like that. And what we're going to do to turn it into a Taffburger is just to add a spoonful of curry powder. Now this is hot curry powder, you can use whatever you like, so you can make it your own. In addition to that, if you want, for this sort of quantity you'd use perhaps half of an onion of this size, chopped up fine. I'm not going to. When I'm catering for other people, I find there are too many people who don't like onions, so I make sure that I don't put any in there. You can also, if you're cooking, if you're using a white meat such as chicken or turkey, you might put in a generous squidge of tomato puree just to give it a bit of colour. But these two are entirely optional. In addition to that, the kit of parts you need, obviously the mincer to mince up the ingredients. I've already used the kitchen scales to weigh them out. About 300 grams of meat and about 450 grams of minced dry bread. Incidentally, dry bread, if you use bread from a loaf, put the slices out overnight so that they get dry, and you'll find that it makes a much better burger. In addition to that, I've got a teaspoon to measure out the curry powder. I've got a knife which I'm not going to need because that would be to cut up the onion. And this I'm going to use to take spoonfuls of the mixture so that I can form them into patties for frying. And I'm going to use egg rings just to sort of make them into nice neat round patties, but you don't have to. And I'll show you how to do it both ways. So I'm going to put these to one side for the moment. I don't need them just yet. And I'm going to start, obviously, clean hands, very important for any cook. Just give them another rinse. Right, so, and of course, mixing bowls. So in here, I'm going to put in the bread, and I'm going to put in the meat, and I'm going to put in a whole egg. So here we go. Right, in with the egg. So what I'm going to do is just to swizzle that, break up the egg, and then mix. Right, and we're going to take just a splash. And this is just ordinary, this is sunflower oil as it happens, but you can use rapeseed oil or olive oil or any oil you want. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add the curry powder. So I'm going to take the curry powder and I'm just going to put in for this a good rounded teaspoon. That should be enough. You can make it stronger if you want, and then make sure that it's all well mixed in. But I'm going to make these straight away, and that's probably what you might want to do anyway for normal use. So I'm now going to take enough to make something a little bit bigger than a golf ball. Just notice hands are very important to this, and I'm going to take a ring. This is basically an egg ring, but it works very nicely as a mould, and I'm going to push it in well, and then where it squidges over the edges, just peel it off and put that back into the mix, and there we go. So that's one, and then to break it away you slide it, and then the same again here. Make another one. And I roll it around in my hands like this, which squeezes out the air from the middle, which then helps to stop it breaking up. And then that goes in here like this. I've got that just about right. There we go. Okay, there's two. Now if you don't have egg rings or moulds, what you can do is you can just do it this way. Just make a similar quantity. You can make them bigger or smaller if you like, but this is a good size. And then notice what I'm doing again, I'm working it round like this to get all the air out, and then I'm just leaving it a little bit flat, and then I can squidge it down a little bit like that. Yes, turn it over, do the same again, squidge it down, make sure it's tucked in at the edges, and that will be fine. Okay. It isn't necessarily better to have homemade food looking like it's been made in a machine. It isn't necessarily better. A little bit of variation adds character, and there we go. So that's it, and the remainder of this will go in the fridge, and I will use that tomorrow when it's matured. When it's matured and more of the juices are soaked into the meat. But these we will do straight away. So the next stage will be to take these to the cooker and we'll start frying them. Right, here we are, we're ready to fry our burgers. Now the first thing we have to do is to take a pan, put enough oil into to well cover the bottom. The burgers, because they've got bread in them, will absorb some oil. So you don't want to deep fry them, but you want enough there so that there's enough for some oil to be absorbed. And then I've got some more handy in case it dries out. Now the important thing is to make sure the oil is hot enough, and the traditional way of checking that is to take a breadcrumb or a tiny piece of the mixture and drop it into the hot fat. And if it dances around on the surface, then it's hot enough. So what we're going to do is we're going to take one of these first, and we're going to place it in there carefully, and then we'll take one of these. Notice when I break them away from the surface, because they will stick to the board, when I break them away from the surface I do it by sliding, and then that can go in, and now, there we go, perfect, and that goes in there, and I'll do these two. I'll come back and do the other two in a minute. So notice all I do, I don't mess them about with a skillet, I just gently do this, and because the fat was really hot when I started, they sealed quickly and didn't stick to the pan. So they will now go for a few minutes, and I will check them by having a look to see. And when the underside is beginning to brown nicely, I shall flip them over and we'll do the other side. So what we can do is we can pop this under here, and we can have a look, and you can see that that is now beginning to brown very nicely. So that's ready, and this one will be the same, so we can turn that over, and another couple of minutes for the other side, and these two will be done. Right, well I think these have been here in a couple of minutes now. We'll have a look and see what they look like underneath, and you can see that's just nicely browning underneath. So what we'll do now, and we'll just check this one as well. There we go, nicely browned. So what we'll do now is we'll take these out, put them on a pre-warmed plate. Right, well there we are. Two burgers, one of which has been done in a nice neat mould, and one of them simply by hand. And you can see they're both perfectly acceptable. And it only remains to use the chef's favourite tool, which is either a fork or a teaspoon for tasting their work, and we'll just try this and see what it's turned out like. That is absolutely perfect.